So, thank you for speaking with us today. Would you please start by introducing yourself, say where you're from?
Sure. I'm Sandra Brown. Everybody calls me Sandy. I'm a distinguished professor at the University of California, San Diego, and I'm in two departments. I'm in the Department of Psychology and the Department of Psychiatry in the School of Medicine. I'm also co-director for the NCANDA, the National Consortium on Alcohol and Neurodevelopment for Adolescents to Adults, and co-director for the ABCD study, which is Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study. Both of the centers for those are located at San Diego.
You sound busy.
We're busy.
Yes.
We're busy, yeah.
That's nice. Something I love about this work is the variety of what we get to do.
Yes, I agree.
So I'd like to start by asking you, how did you move along your path in alcohol research? And then it could be broad, were there influences in your childhood, your adolescence, maybe high school? Were there people that had a special impact to the progression?
Yeah. Oh, it's such an interesting question, and we don't usually get to talk about these kinds of things. So it's a real treat to note my family values for really doing things to help others in the best interest of others. And I went to a small liberal arts college called Hope College in Holland, Michigan, known for its mathematics and chemistry. And I was a math major as an undergrad. And there was a very influential person to me. End of my junior year, I took a class in social psychology from a gentleman by the name of Dave Myers. Now, unbeknownst to me, Dave had the most widely selling social psychology text in the country. Now he has the most widely selling intro to psychology text in the country. And he was so entertaining. And it was so different. It was the first time I really saw how I could take my training in mathematics and apply it to human problems or to human behavior. And it made the turning point. Rather than going on for a PhD in math and computer science, I went into clinical psychology. And it was really as a result of my experience with him.
Would it change? Yeah, something I like about our system is you can change. You can switch your directions. And it's also, what I'm hearing in these interviews is often there's one person or a small number of people that have an outsized impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
What challenges have you faced along your path?
Well, I think there were a number of challenges. I got my PhD in 1981, a long time ago. And I was one of two women in a class of 14 in clinical psychology. Now, the sex distribution is just reverse. There are many more women than there are men. But I think as a result of that, some of the settings that I was interested in were not as used to having women as research assistants, or so things were viewed a little bit differently, and there were perhaps some opportunities that I might have had my gender been different. And I think that was a challenge, but just sort of grew to understand that I needed to make my skills really clear and my interests really clear when I went into these situations. So that type of sort of implicit bias didn't play out. I would say that was one of the challenges. And the other thing is, I just like to do new things. So I think some of the ideas that I had early on in research were either seen as remarkably innovative, or like, what the heck is she thinking? And so that was interesting. I have this good story about how I applied to a private agency for a modest-sized grant that was looking at ways in which youth change their own alcohol use behaviors. And they just turned it down. They just said, there's no evidence for this kind of thing. And I turned around, made probably two paragraphs of change, and then got it funded for 5 years from NIAAA. And that was a real important message to me, that if you see something that's important, then, and even if it's innovative, and you just have to convince people, you have to help them understand what the value of that science is. So that was the challenge.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good message for all of us.
Yeah.
And so what took you to San Diego?
Well, I wrote my first grant application, and it was for, at that time, what NIAAA called a New Investigator Research Award. And I had that in hand, and I had a faculty position in Illinois, and a gentleman by the name of Nelson Butters, who was a renowned neuropsychologist, was on the review committee, and he was moving to the University of California, San Diego. And so even before he had moved himself and his whole family, he called me and said, please come and interview for a job. I'd like to have you come here. And I did, and really the rest is history. I've looked at lots of other positions, but I've really enjoyed being in at UC San Diego. It's a pretty progressive university.
Mm-hmm. Home. Have you experienced any eureka moments?
Oh, eureka moments. I think I can remember times early on in my career. Part of the early portion of my job was to develop the behavioral interventions program at the VA in San Diego within the alcohol and drug treatment program. And I think that my extensive experience in that context gave me a deep appreciation for the challenges beyond alcohol or other drug involvement at that time that veterans were experiencing. Lots of heterogeneity, so PTSD and depression and anxiety disorders, and subsequently I sort of saw the same thing with youth, an underserved population, just like people who had depression and alcohol. They were typically excluded from treatment studies because of their depression, or PTSD. They were excluded because of their PTSD. And so I think for me, having seen the population, hearing people's stories, really made me appreciate how important it is to attend to the heterogeneity of folks who have alcohol use disorders. And much of my early career was focused on that.
Yeah, that sounds like a powerful impact.
Yes, it did have a strong impact of me. I think going back to what you asked early on about early experiences, I think seeing those populations that were underserved made a difference in the choices that I made in my career.
Mm-hmm. When was your first RSA meeting?
Yeah, I do remember. I actually remember it pretty in a pretty powerful way. The only other young person I remember at the meeting was Ken Scher. Ken's just a little bit older than me, and that was his first RSA meeting in the Isle of Palms in South Carolina. And at that time, in the 80s, RSA was a predominantly biologically driven, genetically focused organization. And Ken and I were both interested in issues much beyond those two domains. And so we sort of became kindred spirits. And it was just really fun and enjoyable to get to meet all of these people whose research I had read all throughout graduate school. It was a pretty exhilarating experience as a graduate student.
So from that, can I assume that even in the 80s, RSA already had this personality of approachability?
I don't know if I'd put it that way, but on the other hand, here I was, just this, rookie, and I might have been a bit more apprehensive about approaching people. Over the years, I found RSA as a much more engaging community of scientists than other organizations I belong to. And I think there is a real emphasis on helping people feel like if they're interested in anything that's related to alcohol, this can be their home. And I love that about RSA.
Yeah, I feel likewise. So the field of alcohol research is really interactive.
Yes.
I think it's sort of what you just said leads into that. And it currently and in the past, and are there people you consider, including yourself, but are there people you consider that have had an important impact on your research and other work in the alcohol field?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. My advisor in graduate school was Mark Goldman. Probably know Mark well. He has been the president of RSA. He was the deputy director for NIAAA for a number of years and has run a clinical psychology program at University of South Florida. And I chose to work with Mark not because of his alcohol focus, but because when I first went to graduate school, we had all the faculty parade in front of us, do these little brown bag seminars, and they would tell us about their research. I thought he was the brightest person there. I thought he made it really clear why doing research in alcohol was so exciting that I just chose to work with him. And once I started working in the alcohol arena, so many of the other things that I mentioned to you came into play. But Mark made a big difference. He was my advisor. And then I also mentioned Nelson Butters, a neuropsychologist, who was the gentleman who brought me out to UC San Diego, recruited me to the Department of Psychiatry there. And Nelson was quite a character. He was a bold thinker, and I always admired that about him. And I think much of what we understand about the need for attention to neuropsychological factors in the role of neuropsychology in alcohol can be partially at least attributed to him and some of his early work. And when I came to San Diego, Mark Shuckett was there. Now, who can't be impressed and learn from somebody like Mark? And Mark ran the alcohol and drug treatment program at the VA Medical Center. And that's where I went to develop the behavioral programs and family programs there. And he taught me to write well. And I think that it made a tremendous difference in my early publications and in grantsmanship. And Mark is a wonderful mentor, and he's had a long-standing impact, I think, on my career. And I think perhaps a final person to mention is Bob Zucker from the University of Michigan. And I mentioned Bob because I was very interested in how youth become involved and lured into the process of alcohol and other substance use. And Bob was one of the premier people in that first generation of alcohol researchers who looked at youth and family factors. And through his Michigan longitudinal study that lasted, I think, 30 years, where he studied children from maybe 3 years of age, on out, he learned so much about the process of engaging people in this, in long-term commitment to research. And most of my research is longitudinal in nature. So I learned so much from him. And he and I, just a few years ago, co-edited a book together. We've written a number of things together, but we co-edited a book. Mm-hmm. And he's a delightful man, recently retired.
But speaking of longitudinal work, what is it that prompted the development of the NCANDA and the ABCD
Oh,
projects. And how did you end up overseeing those?
yeah. Well, good question. I have been either placed in or sought leadership positions at the University of California, San Diego for a number of years. So I just had a lot of experience in running programs and projects. And I think that early engagement and some of the NIAAA activities, serving on boards, special committees, for example. Ken and I worked on the definition of binge for NIAAA, and brief interventions, that was another one. And we're involved in the design of the RFA for NCANDA, and lesser so for ABCD, but I had already launched NCANDA at that time. And because of a T32 program that we had at UC San Diego, and an internship and a postdoctoral program that I developed in the VA as well, we always had this wonderful group of junior people who were coming on board. And over time, you just accrue a lot of talent. And so NIAAA had a series of pilots prior to deciding to launch NCANDA, to determine things like follow-up, how can you do imaging with young people, a whole variety of things like that. Mine was focused on really, can you do studies of what improvements or changes when young people stop drinking. In any event, we were involved in that. And I think the pilots were so successful, the 5 pilots, that when they did the announcement for the NCANDA opportunity, I said, we can do that. And I just pulled in, at that time, I had a junior colleague who just won the Distinguished Researcher Award this year, Susan Tapert. And she and I put together the administrative core for NCANDA. And we started working with a group of people, groups across the country that we knew would be really stellar at what we were trying to do. And we started meeting before we even, the application opportunity came out. And it resulted in, I think, kind of refining and streamlining ideas that then made it a really strong application. I was a couple years into that, maybe a bit more than that. And at that time, I had progressed to being the vice chancellor for research at UC San Diego. And that's when the ABCD opportunity came out, which I knew would be too much for me to be the vice chancellor for an institution that has, $1.2 billion worth of research every year, and be a lead for the NCANDA project, and then think about being a lead for another even bigger project. So I met with Terry Jernigan, noted neuroimaging, neurodevelopmental researcher, and she and I decided, well, together we could do the coordinating center, and came up with a big broad plan of groups to invite, to encourage, to apply, and how to help them do that. And I think the dealing with large systems as the vice chancellor for research helped in the design, the administrative structure and design for ABCD. It's a different animal when you've got 21 institutions across the country and so many federal agencies lined up to fund a project, each of which, of course, has its own priorities. So that was quite an adventure. But I think that that more senior administrative service was very helpful in the original structure and design. And the rest is history. We're on year number 11 in ABCD, and 13 going on 14 in NCANDA. And both of them have been remarkably successful. And I don't take credit for it. I think it's just, I like to surround myself by really bright, energetic people, and I learn from them every day.
That's well, that sounds like good leadership, actually. So Rajita Sinha and I directed T32, and many of our fellows over the years have been going into the ABCD study
Lovely.
data set, really making good use of it. It's quite a gold mine you've created.
It's remarkable. I will tell you, it is done even better than I expected. We have, I think, something like 3,800 people around the globe who are using the ABCD data set. We are approaching, if not just past, 2,000 publications. And the majority of the publications now are with people who may be working for you or others. They are outside of the investigators for ABCD. It's something like 65% of publications come from outside of ABCD. I think it's exactly what open science was designed to do, to make it easier for people to answer questions that are of theoretical and practical importance.
Yeah. So continuing along that thread, what impact so far do you think that NCANDA and ABCD have had on our understanding of alcohol use, misuse, longitudinally, maybe on interactions with other substances?
Yeah. Oh, it's such a big question because they're really big projects. And I'll start with NCANDA. And NCANDA is smaller, only has 5 sites. The design is very different. It's an accelerated longitudinal cohort design. So we selected people from ages 12 to 21 in kind of 3 different age groups. The majority of them were either not drinking or under what the average drinking patterns were for their age. But we have about 17% that are above that. And that sequential cohort design is remarkably advantageous in having information across the arc of adolescence and into adulthood in a faster period of time. And as a result of that, in 5 years, you could have people from ages 12 to 26. And then you're really being able to look at, with a sample of over 800, I think we had 831, how normal brains are changing, what happens with the onset of alcohol or drug problems, and use, and then progression to, in the case of NCANDA, looking at binging, which I think that was a key hypothesis for us, that for adolescents, because adolescents binge, they drink about twice as much each time they drink as an adult does. That's what we ought to be paying attention to. And also that means they're more likely to be over the sort of blood alcohol concentration that we consider intoxication. And that's also where more of the accidents, injuries, et cetera, unfold. So we really targeted a topic that we thought was most helpful to understand adolescent drinking. As a result of that, the imagers that we're working with, in particular Dolph Pfefferbaum and his team at SRI, Ian Coleraine, Fiona Baker, et cetera, Edie Sullivan, they've been able to identify changes in brain structure and function with the onset of any drinking and then with the onset of heavy drinking. And they were some of the first to demonstrate the more rapid loss of gray matter with the onset of heavy drinking, the attenuation of white matter development, and the interference with the integrity of white matter development. Those are kinds of things in our large ABCD cohort. It will take years for us to get to. because it's a single age. But we had this 10-year span in ABCD. More recently, the group has been looking at more mechanistic things. So what actually triggers early use in the what factors in the brain trigger early use? People always talk about the nucleus accumbens, but what does that mean? How does that operate to bring about the behavior of personally initiating your alcohol use? And also, what are factors that help turn off, or excuse me, turn use into habitual use, where people are less purposeful about it and it becomes more automatic? And we've got a really exciting group at the University of Pittsburgh under the leadership of Bea Luna, who are looking at exactly those kinds of things. One final thing I'll mention about NCANDA is that we have brilliant statisticians. And when you have a large-scale cumulative data set that has many domains of functioning and contextual factors that are crucial to adolescent development, you have to have some pretty sophisticated statisticians to be able to not just look at group differences from a longitudinal perspective, but develop individual trajectories so you can see for each individual how does something make a difference either in their drinking or the effects of drinking or decisions to not drink. So NCANDA is very special that way. It's one of the largest projects like that that focuses on alcohol in the United States. And I'm really excited because we're getting into the 20s to will be early 30s, where we'll be able to now begin to see how the things we've measured when they were adolescents are showing up in terms of alcohol consequences, medical kinds of problems, for example, that would take a couple decades to identify with another design.
So I have a question on that. Maybe you're not there yet with the data. Long ago, when I was in college, there were people who arrived there and it's as if they exploded, and some continued to drink and others didn't.
Yes.
So do you know yet what drives that difference? And for those who stop drinking, how much recovery do you see from the changes that have occurred?
Well, this isn't an advertisement for NCANDA.
Okay.
But if we get a renewal this time around, we will have people who will have gone through the phase of adult development where we expect people's drinking to decrease. Epidemiological studies suggest that there's this quick drop off near the end or right after college, and then there's a gradual decline after that. We'll be able to look at some of those things more specifically. But I will share with you that the recent evidence that we have both from NCANDA and ABCD suggests that while people have biological vulnerabilities and neurobiological vulnerabilities, genetic vulnerabilities, that it is social and environmental factors that get them going and that produce the rapid acceleration that you're talking about. A good example is much heavier drinking in the Greek system in college than in the non-Greek system. Well, if you're both the same college, what is that difference? It's the environment. It's the social environment. And but what we are learning, to the second part of your question, is that we're beginning to understand whether when people stop drinking, their brains just continue to compensate for changes that were provoked by the heavy drinking, or whether it actually normalizes. And we've just published a first paper on this. Maribel Gonzalez and Wes Thompson are the lead authors for that. And it does demonstrate that there is a normalizing of brain functioning following reductions and cessation from binge drinking. And it doesn't have to be cessation to see improvement in brain size or improvement in the corpus callosum. Reductions in binge drinking can demonstrate those same improvements. That is remarkably important, so that we know that it may not be that people's brains are damaged permanently, that there is a disruption in development, and there can be at least a partial return to normality after that. And that'll be a big focus of the next phase of our study.
Yeah, that's reason for optimism.
Yes,
And,
it is.
Encourage people to you stop and things will get better.
That's right. That's right. If you can drink less than once a month, it looks like we can see the changes I was just talking about. Now, that's in Canada. The other big project, of course, is ABCD. And that is really just a plethora of new information on the risk for and onset of early alcohol and other substance involvement. And again, it supports what I said that we found in Canada about social, family, and environmental factors that are very malleable, playing much more of a role in the initiation and early phases of alcohol involvement. In that project, it took us about a year to get organized, a couple of years to generate the 2,000 families, 12,000 families.
Yes.
And so now we've completed about 8 years of follow-up. We're into the 9th year of follow-up there. So people have gone from like age 9 or 10 up to 17 or 18. We're doing those 17, 18-year-old follow-ups now. And we've learned a lot, not just about alcohol, but other aspects of functioning as well, about sleep and alcohol, screen time and alcohol use, screen time and risk for other mental health disorders and mental health problems. We've learned a lot about the risks that are simply home risks for early alcohol engagement with youth. We've learned some things that I think people don't commonly think about. For example, we know that Black families talk to their children more about alcohol and drugs. They're more likely to have rules against alcohol or drug use earlier on compared to Caucasian families. And that looks like that makes a difference. We know that parents soliciting drinks, that's something that prompts a normality of early drinking for children, and might not be something that we should do. You know, over 90% of kids get their first drink from their mom, their dad, a respected neighbor, an uncle, aunt, something like that. And ease of access to alcohol at home makes a difference in if, when, and how much youth drink. So we're learning a lot about the ramp up to early alcohol involvement through the ABCD project, as well as risks for that and risk for other kinds of things like mental health problems.
It sounds like in a very practical sense, helping to want to keep the country as healthy as we can. It's
Yes.
important that these projects continue.
Yes. Yeah.
So what do you see as a future for large longitudinal studies of alcohol and other substances?
Yeah. Well, it's a really good question and a very challenging one because with research funding not escalating like it has in some some periods in the past, I see these projects that are open science projects where the data gathered in a very careful way that's well articulated, that where there are standards for people who have access to it. There's information about what the variables are, how to best use them, algorithms for use, recommended analytic approaches. When we have that, it accelerates science. A lot of money has been poured into projects like ABCD, but I don't know if anyone has yet calculated the outcome value per the dollar that's poured in. But I think that it's easier to bring people into the field when they can generate a question and there's a data set that they can go to answer it, rather than have to do all of this recruitment themselves and take 5 years to do a project. They could probably do a project in a year. So I do know that it absolutely accelerates the progress of science. It's a challenge to keep these things funded, and I think part of our job is to make clear what the findings are, what importance they are for policy and for clinical services, whether we're talking about how should we address some of these things in primary care, or how to best really tell how much somebody is using alcohol. And the way to do that is not always to have somebody come into the doctor's office. So I think some of the new technologies that are being developed, wearable technologies in particular, other kinds of measures of alcohol exposure, like hair samples. We're all used. People always know about the breathalyzer or blood draws, but even nail samples can give you information about alcohol. So I think that putting money into projects where the public can have confidence in the way that the science is being conducted, know that it's replicable, and that it's very transparent, will, in the long run, add to confidence in science in general, and could play a big role in having the U.S. continue to be a leader in science in a more efficient, financially efficient way than other approaches.
Yeah, I see. Excuse me. What would you like to see for you've already addressed to this partly. What would you like to see for the future of alcohol research? And there's what you'd like to see, and what do you expect to see?
Yeah, I think right now we have a cadre of very energized people in the process of being trained, and junior researchers who have resources that they can avail themselves through open science study now. It will continue to advance the field, even if we have a dip in funding for a period of time. So I think that the investment that's been made in NCANDA, in ABCD, in other large-scale open science projects that can serve either as the total source for someone's exploration of a scientific question, or as a comparison group to something that they're doing. Both of those things, I think, bode well for alcohol research going forward. I think we'll be able to have some really clear policy implications that can make a difference in the health of the United States, both the health of youth and the health of adults. in particular preventing chronic diseases, many of which are exacerbated by heavy alcohol involvement. So I'm really optimistic that way. I think we are going through challenging times. It takes a while for the public to know about the science that we do. And oftentimes what happens is we develop the problems with a new technology or a new behavior, and then policy is trying to catch up. And I think that's where we're at with alcohol and a lot of other things. I mean, look at how much time children spend on screen time they have, how much they're on social media. We are only now beginning to understand how that alters the learning experience. And now, post hoc, we're trying to figure out, okay, what should be good guidelines for that? Same thing with things as simple as sleep hygiene. It makes a tremendous difference in terms of how people develop physically, how their brains develop, socio-emotional aspects as well. And, new guidelines for parents, for families, for schools, for physicians is what we need for this new era. The children that are growing up today are growing up in a very different world than you and I grew up in. And the demands on them, the social context under which they operate are markedly different. And as a result, their mental health issues are different. Their substance use patterns are different. And so to rely on old recommendations at a time that doesn't really fit the challenges that our youth are experiencing puts us a step behind. And I think that's one of the exciting things about open science, is that it gives us an opportunity to sort of leapfrog and to say, okay, this is what it's like today. These are the problems, and these parts are malleable. We can fix these, and this is all you need to do.
Mm-hmm. Again, I hear you describe challenges, but reason for optimism, because we're getting data. We just need to continue to get the data, and then present that to the public in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I should be so succinct.
For researchers at the start of their careers, do you have any guidance, any advice to offer?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I think if you, it's a really good question. I think being, getting yourself in an environment where you are comfortable enough talking with someone who can help guide you is important. We pay a lot of attention these days to the sort of network that our graduate students, undergraduates have, graduate students have, postdocs have. And I think it makes a tremendous difference, because there is not one way to get a grant. There's not one way to be successful. There's not only one trajectory for a career. And having peers that you can talk to about their thoughts, ideas, pathways that they've taken helps you keep an open mind about things. And it's hard to know what advanced institutions are going to look like, 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to know what the new artificial or synthetic drugs will be that could potentially challenge the health and livelihood of our upcoming generations. And I think that developing a group around you that you could feel you can talk to and is really important. It's that social networking component. And I'm not really fond of that term, but I think having a few people that you can trust, that you can talk to, makes a big difference. And coming to organizations like RSA, like the annual conference at RSA, can really help that. Some of my closest friends, as I have moved through my career, have not been people who were in the office next door, but in an office across the country. And that's in no small part because of RSA.
And actually, I hear that across fields. I studied nuclear engineering in college. And I remember my senior year, the professor saying, well, it's important you go to the conferences and to learn new things, meet other people, get new ideas. So it's got to be even for electric power generation.
Yes.
This principle holds.
I also think that part of this, it's more important now than ever before, because many of the questions that we have are not questions that a single professional can answer. It takes a diversified team of scientists or researchers to bring all of those perspectives together. And part of this developing a network of peers that you can talk to, or a mentor or two that you feel comfortable with, is it opens doors and you find out how to talk to people from different kinds of backgrounds. And we learn different frameworks to approach problems that way. And I think that advantages, I think that actually accelerates science.
Yes. So for research in general, is there anything you'd like to ask all of us to be doing?
Actually, there is. And tomorrow morning in my plenary, I'm going to ask people at the end this very question. In the era of open science, there are so many advantages for you. You don't have to get the sample. You don't have to design the study. You don't have to determine what are the optimal measures to use. It's all there for you. So open science gives you lots of opportunities. But open science has different kinds of challenges, I think, than we had historically when we were designing, conducting our own research, and then holding our data sets ourselves. So anyone, not anyone, but people who have access to those large data sets can do a whole variety of things with the data. So it means that how we design the studies needs to include domains that are going to be important for a variety of different people. I think they're best if they have engagement from some of the communities that they're meant to serve or to study. I think our choice of using measures is important, and we should not rely only on formally validated measures. We have lots of new technologies that can enhance information that we're gathering without overburdening the subject. But at the tail end, when somebody gets access to the data, beyond that, it's not the researchers who generated the project that bear the responsibility for ensuring the integrity of what gets published. It's all of us. Anyone can go in with a particular bias and find data or analyze data in a way that distorts accurate information. And I think we bear more of a responsibility to be sure that our data are used in I'm speaking, this is the royal we, right? All researchers, that we bear a responsibility to be sure that data are used responsibly according to whatever commitments we make when we have access to that data, and that we're behaving in an ethical fashion, that we're not purposely trying to diminish any subgroup, any group of individuals in a way that actually leads to misinterpretation and continued discrimination. So I think we have more ethical responsibility than ever before, not just for what we do, but for paying attention to what other people are doing and saying. And I think that is a byproduct of open science.
For members of the public who might watch this video,
Uh-huh.
is there anything you'd like to say straight to them?
Oh, geez. Let's see. What would I like to say to the public? I'm very excited about science. I think that we are on the cusp of many breakthroughs to problems that people have in their day-to-day lives. If everybody knows someone with an alcohol problem, the science today could help them take some action to help that person. I think there are opportunities for parents to know and get some guidance about child rearing in a way that we've never had before, because we have so much more information about what our children are doing than ever before and what their challenges are. And I think there are new avenues to help them. So I'm very hopeful. I hope that that many of the findings that come out of these open science projects can be made available to the public in a way that you can use that information and to make your life better, to make your family's life better, to make your community's life better. And I think open science creates a means to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Sandy?
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.